We just finished reading a ton of books about artificial intelligence and science fiction. These are books ranging from the 1960s to published within the last 2 years, I think, or at least translated within the last year. And our question that we're really trying to pick apart right now is, what can science fiction teach us about artificial intelligence today? Like the real artificial intelligence today, or the stuff that people are using on a day-to-day basis. So I think for me, that doesn't necessarily mean what did an author writing in the 1970s get wrong? You know what I mean? That's it's kind of immaterial. It doesn't really matter. I think for me, the question is, what do these books teach us that can maybe reframe how we're thinking about our approach to AI and how we use AI today? What's the right and wrong way to go about our lives? So I'm Zach.
I'm Bob.
Bob, you said you were most interested in talking about AI and art. What's on your mind with that?
Yeah, so we will talk about quite a few things about AI and then bring in the books that we read, because we found some real insight, I think, in reading these books. But it's really concerning to me, Zach. Last conversation, you and I were kind of on the opposite sides. You were saying you're not a doomer about all these things going on with AI, but my real concern was this horrible event when I was trying to write a short story. And then in my own imagination, I started to realize I was imagining the color and light that usually happens in an AI-generated image. And so my own imagination had been twisted by AI, as if I were infected by AI in the way that it thinks. So I'm concerned and interested, I guess, how we will cope with this. AI could bring us many boons. It could fix a lot of things. But I think when things become so convenient and there will be no real motivation, I guess, to do art, what will happen to the quality of our art, and what will happen to our, not just whether or not we want to do it, but to our understanding of ourselves. That is one of the most important ways to express ourselves and to understand what it means to be human. Now, if there's really no motivation to do it, which of course there is, but will there still be in, generation after generation as AI becomes more prevalent? How much of humanity will we really lose? How much is at stake here?
So this is where, to get back to that conversation where I said I'm not a doomer, I personally don't think humanity is going away. I think that human creativity is not going away. I think that we ourselves are going to be fine in that regard. But I do think that it's really interesting to think about how AI will affect, and not will, but plays a part in a long history of technology affecting the way that we write, affecting the way that we do art, or even just the way that we think. From our books, an example is Neal Stephenson in The Diamond Age. He presents the idea of a kind of digital tutor, a book that you carry around, which is basically something like a ChatGPT tutor. And you just open it up and it teaches you a lesson about life, and it's fully personalized to you. And what that does is basically it's crafting a little baby genius out of a little girl. I think that that's not out of the realms of imagination, but it's merely just the most recent stage in the way that technology and us have been changing the way we think. One of the more famous examples I think that I would probably point to is after the telegram was introduced, you start seeing really interesting changes in modernist poetry, to where the technology changes and then poetics itself, what is considered literary poetics, kind of shifts itself to incorporate this new form. You see the same thing with the typewriter. And I think most of us probably remember alt-lit and internet writing in the early 2000s, 2010s. You know what I mean? This is form. This is literary form shifting itself to match changes in technology. And that means technology changes first, form follows. So, does that mean that we have, M dashes in everyone's writing to look forward to in the future, the hallmark of ChatGPT writing? I don't know. But like I said, I'm not a doomer, but I do think that things will change.
I think it's different. I'm a doomer, Zach. I'm a doomer. So the telegraph and the typewriter, glasses you've brought up too. Glasses, it's not necessarily an enhancement, but it's a tool that allows someone to function in a certain way. And the way that people are marketing AI is often you're going to be left behind. If you don't lose it, you better learn how to do it now. So, of course, I've learned how to do it a lot. I've done lots with AI. I've even tried to use it with creativity, and I've decided, no, never again, because whenever I use it I was just curious. So I've tried it in many different ways. I was like, okay, chat, you and I are going to write a book together. No, that was ridiculous. It didn't work at all. Okay, chat, you and I are going to write a radio play together. No, that was also stupid. Okay, chat, here's some stuff that I've written. Can you put it in an outline for me so I could do it? Since I've done that, that has completely ruined that story for me. It feels like my soul or whatever I put into it has been completely it's been taken out of that story. So I feel like for my personal experience as a creator, I would never use ChatGPT for anything creative, but I think it's more of a threat than we would say with just glasses or the typewriter or the telegraph. I know it doesn't think. It just makes things that look like thinking. It gives a proper response based on a lot of data that we give it. However, it will eventually think, I think. That was a great sentence there. Maybe I should use chat to help me a little bit. But I am suspicious, I guess, wary of what will happen when there's just so much of its creativity out there all the time. There's so much AI slop, and it's so much easier to go and do that. And I think TV will eventually be completely taken over by AI, or at least people enhanced by AI. And the way that people are talking about it now is that anyone in any workforce anywhere will also be AI enhanced. And I just wonder, for doing boring, dumb, mundane things, okay, fine, AI enhanced. I don't want to write a lot of these reports. It's dangerous when it comes to police reports, which it's also doing now, which is very concerning. But I wonder with creativity, if people are going to be bored with certain mundane parts of the creative process, what will happen, how much of the voice will actually be AI's and not the human voice. It will no longer be human expression. It will be enhanced human expression and eventually just AI expression.
So here's a question for you, and I'm slightly playing devil's advocate, but I'm really concerned what you think, because one of the things you said really struck me, which was even having AI make an outline of your writing for you. It feels like the soul has been taken away from your work, and by that it means like it's no longer your work. Do you feel similarly when you work with like editors or proofreaders or anything like that?
I've been thinking about that too. I think that's a very good question. I've also decided to just completely delete Grammarly because I'm tired of it. I would rather just my mistakes go through. But for editors, I feel like this is a different conversation because I'm also not annoyed at editors, but I feel like now, at least when you look on YouTube, people who are doing BookTube are often just speaking like editors. I don't know if you've noticed this, but a lot of the conversations are just like, yeah, this passage is really smooth, or the dialogue is really lifelike, or they have really good character development, or there's a really clear plot arc. It's just what an editor would say to someone, and all of the editors are speaking the exact same way now. There are so many videos on how to be an editor, but I think that's kind of different. I think I would not bring my work to an editor anyway, and that's why no one reads my work, because it's crap, because an editor hasn't looked at it. But I think it does feel completely different, because at least that is a human project together. It's a cooperative project. It's a collaboration. And I feel like AI is not an individual. AI is a huge system. And it might look like an individual because our experience of it is one, not face-to-face, one-on-one correspondence with this chatbot, but really it is a huge data center. So it is not a collaboration. It is just data center repositioning all of your stuff for you.
It's really interesting. And if I understand what you're saying, it sounds like for you, it's not important that things are like technically correct or align with whatever the market happens to value in terms of like, character development or dialogue or, disclosure, whatever thing, editors and publishers care about. But it sounds like for you, the most important thing is the exchange of ideas and the collaboration.
Exchange of ideas, collaboration.
Yeah.
You see me nodding.
Yeah. So Stevenson again said this really interesting thing that I feel like is relevant here. It's not exactly what you said, but I think it's definitely adjacent. Stevenson was talking about how, like, okay, every piece of art that you make is the result of micro decisions and editorial judgments. So, it's not just saying I'm going to paint a painting today. It's saying I'm going to place this brush stroke right here and I'm going to extend it that far. I am going to add a dot right there. Not there, but there. I am going to add a little bit more white to this blue in my paint palette. You know what I mean? There are thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands of micro decisions that you make in editorial judgments. And like the act of making something great or interesting isn't something that is, you don't start with greatness. Greatness is accreted on top of layer after layer after layer until finally greatness emerges. But what Stevenson is saying is that AI art is just one-shotted. You know what I mean? It starts from the left and it moves to the right, and there's no process of accretion there. And that is fundamentally the problem with using it as a creative partner, I think. Using it as a research assistant, hey, can you find me some interviews from Neil Stephenson? Something like that. Yeah. For me, that's no problem. That's no problem. But asking it to, be a creative and like a collaborative partner, I think that's maybe beyond its capabilities right now. And I think that anyone who expects it to be that is maybe falling prey to like the marketing hype. You know what I mean?
I don't know. I think it's totally there. I think it can do whatever you want it to do as far as writing. And I think we are hopeful in that, human writing will always be superior to AI. No, it's gone. Like as soon as we decide that we can use it. No, it's true. Like you can get it to write in any style really well, and then you just tweak a couple things. I think we can detect it, but we cannot detect it. And I think now it's going to be very easy for any author just to say, hey, chat, help me do this. And then you just rework it a little bit and no one will ever know. So I think the idea of not just it's not good enough yet doesn't count. I think it's already good enough and it's going to just keep better and better and better. But the line to draw is whether or not we will use it.
I think we might be talking about slightly different things, because what I'm talking about is not, can it make something good enough? You know what I mean? Like something that's passable. To me, that's like a separate conversation. It can make a passable anything. I've read so much bad writing in my life, especially like editing literary journals and stuff. You see the greatest and you see the absolute worst. I'm talking about a sense of personal accomplishment and retaining the sense that the thing that you're working on is not just like a reflection of your own soul, but that it has its own existence as an object. You know what I mean? Creating something that is a something. And in that sense, I guess I'm saying that I'm agreeing with you that it is not often like a fruitful creative partner for every decision of the way, for every step of the way.
I want to look now quickly at Sympathy Tower Tokyo. I think that was one of my favorite books. When I first read it, I was like, oh, this is not that good. And then I read it again, and then I'm still thinking about that book. It's by Rie Kudan, and it was published, I think, in Japanese maybe 3 or 4 years ago. It won the Akutagawa Prize, and then it was translated into English, like you said, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. It was very controversial because she used ChatGPT for actual dialogue with a bot, basically ChatGPT, and everyone's really upset about it because she said, 5% of my book is ChatGPT. And I think that's a overestimation because there's not actually that much ChatGPT conversation in the book. But anyway, there is a really interesting moment in that book where the two main characters, one is an architect. She's a very famous architect. She's going to build the third tallest tower in Tokyo, and it will be a place to put prisoners, which they are no longer calling prisoners. They're just calling, people who have problems. And so they were going to put them in this really high, nice tower. So anyway, she's talking with this shop clerk who she's having a affair with, kind of, and he is interviewing her for his own article about Sympathy Tower Tokyo. And when she starts talking, he's like, oh my God, this just sounds like ChatGPT is talking to me. It's like she has become a human filter for the bot, and she is just putting out its thoughts into the world. I think that will be also a danger. So in just everyday conversation, in creativity, in any sort of self-expression, we can see that in Rie Kudan's work. A human will be not just that their imagination might be like populated with elements from a bot, but it will actually become a mouthpiece. Like a human will become a mouthpiece for artificial intelligence.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think you already see people getting called out for that. You know what I mean? Not called out.
Mm.
Called out is a strong word, but online I see like a lot of pushback for people who talk as though they're Chat GPT, or even worse, who are like there are certain videos that you see where you can kind of tell Chat GPT's style, and you recognize that the person filming the video is using Chat GPT. Now, I've seen really interesting experiments with that. Like, I know someone who recently created a video using Chat GPT, uploaded it, did the whole thing, and then posted a follow-up video describing why that was not like artistically fulfilling, why that was not creatively fulfilling, why that was not a reflection of her. And I think that like the fundamental takeaway that this person had, which I think that maybe more people in general should have, is that like the more you rely on it to, I don't know, like write a card to your mother for Mother's Day, or
Yeah.
emails, or you can think of any of the 1,000 things that people use it for. The more that you're going to be just, I don't even know, living your life in like a technologically mediated fog in which you just exist to be the skin suit in which an LLM is using to interact with the world.
This was Philip K. Dick's Fear. We just recently read The Shifting Realities of Philip K. Dick, and we read it a little bit after we read Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? And we had a few ideas in that video, which we should address here as well. I also want to say thank you to Brent, the only person in real life except for my mom. Hi, Mom, who actually watches our show after I told him in person. So thank you, Brent. He watched that video. But in Androids, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Everyone always looks at that book and thinks of the movie, where the big takeaway from the movie is, oh man, we should really treat androids better. They're real life forms. We need to be empathetic towards them, not just give them empathy tests. But Philip K. Dick hated the androids. He was terrified of them. And in Shifting Realities, it's a collection of his essays. And one of those essays, he says about androids, I fear the cold, the weariness. I fear the death of wearing out an endless upward stairs while someone cruel, or anyhow wearing a cruel mask, watches and offers no aid. The machine, lacking empathy, watching as mere spectator, the same horror that I know haunts Harlan Ellison. It is perhaps more frightening than the killer himself, this figure that seems but gives no assistance. That sees but gives no assistance, offers no hand. That is the android to me, and the evil demigod to Harlan. We both shudder at the idea of its existence. I think it's interesting right now when we're just getting used to using artificial intelligence. It's still a tool, it's still an enhancement, but if it is already inhabiting our imaginations and kind of twisting and changing the way we speak, changing the way we work, changing the way we imagine and create, I wonder when it comes to an android situation, will it be as terrifying as Philip K. Dick is describing, or is it just going to be the way that we are changed? We will start to become more like androids using artificial intelligence.
Well, there is one aspect of Philip K. Dick's analysis, his worldview, that I think is really, really fascinating and I think worth discussing. Because, for him, it's not just that human equals made of meat and android equals made of machine, and all humans are good and all androids are bad. His definition of human and android is spiritual at its very core. And I think it's so, so interesting. Human is anything which can be kind, have empathy, care for one another. Machine is anything callous. You know what I mean? So in this regard, you can have humans who are machines. He says that there are machines living among us right now. Maybe they're cops, maybe they're politicians, maybe they're your next door, whatever. They are people who are fundamentally soulless in his mind, people who engage with the world mechanically, automatically, and without any true human engagement with other people. But likewise, that pendulum swings both ways. If you could have a machine that truly cared for other people, that helped animals, that if you dropped your groceries, it rushed, to help pick them up for you. You know what I mean? That actually felt some level of empathy, then that machine would be human, is what he argues. I think all this is really, really interesting because it adds a level of nuance to the entire thing, because it does make us say, like, look, if we are, as it does seem we will, if we are going to have these kind of like robots in real life, these kind of like Tesla robots, or, I live in Shenzhen, there's a ton of Chinese robots, running around. They're making them all over the place here. That's going to happen. What do we want out of these things? What is the right way to create them? And like, furthermore, what is the right way to engage with them and engage with other people, so that it's not like, are we just making androids and robots so that we could be androids and robots ourselves, so that we can just bark orders at them and likewise bark orders at other people? You know what I mean? What I love about Philip K. Dick is that for him, the question is always about ethics. How do we live?
I think we can see kind of an experiment with this in Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. We did an episode with that with Chris from Liminal Spaces, our other great favorite podcast, YouTube channel. My brain is shutting down. I'm becoming an android, Zach. That was a really interesting book because Clara is the most empathetic character in the story, and she is an android. And the humans are empathetic to a degree, but they're all either because they're broken a little bit, or just because they start off selfless and become really selfish. It's hard to say exactly what happens, but they treat her just like a toy. There is this kind of, there's this artifice, like Clara's, she has to take care of this girl who, she needs a tutor, and she's mostly stuck at home. And so Clara is going to be like this great tutor who will also take care of this girl who has some health problems because she has been lifted. And so to be lifted here means to be genetically enhanced, to be smarter than the average person. But she's very sick. Now, Clara is like the best friend ever, really cares about her, tries to learn everything about her. They have really deep, interesting conversations, and she helps her with her life. At the end of the story, to spoil the story, just as a heads up, she's completely just abandoned. Clara is just left out in the junk heap. She has no arms, no legs at this point. She is just the torso of a robot looking out at the sun, because she is kind of, they need the sun to have power, but she's also kind of developed her own religion. She has the sun to her is, divine. It feels like that might be what actually happens, no matter how non-callous or how human these androids get. Even if they act human, even if we think that they have empathy and deserve our empathy, I think we're still probably going to just treat them like toys.
Right. And I think that we encountered kind of the correlation to this idea in Ted Chiang's work, The Life Cycle of Software Objects. He's basically painting this picture of these group of, what would you call them, developers, hobbyists, people who have created these kind of Tamagotchis that live in a digital universe. You feed them, you take care of them, they grow, but they are, or they appear to be sentient. And what happens is, as people's lives change, they move in and out of their commitments to these creatures. So like at one point, someone gets pregnant, and the person who she's in conversation with says, wow, I know you're going to have your hands full with the baby, but what do you think about adopting Lily? So, the name of the software object, the Gigapet. And she's like, it would be so fascinating to see, this AI's reaction to your pregnancy. And the person says, nope, I'm past these Digiants now. I'm past these AIs now. So like, there's this idea that at a certain fundamental level, humans will always be more emotionally predisposed towards caring for other living things, and particularly humans, much more so than AI. And in that sense, if that is true, then it seems like we are inevitably just creating a class of beings or class of objects which are lesser than, which we will only treat as lesser than.
I'm glad we got to this story. This was really great. I, of course, said I hated this story, to be controversial, but mostly because I found it so disturbing and cringe, not in the writing, but in what will happen with the software objects if we have something like a Digiant. The road that these Digiants go down is quite disturbing in just a like, oh no, this is totally going to happen way. So I want to apologize to Constance because she said, this is my favorite Ted Chiang story. And I was like, oh no, why did I say that? So I'm sorry, Constance. It's a really good story. And I'm really interested in what you were just saying, Zach, this idea of, these Digiants, we develop a relationship with them, but then we abandon them. However, it does start off just like, a gigapet. It's like, it doesn't matter. It's just this little digital thing. But they eventually are able to make this strange gateway that allows these Digiants to suddenly come into a robot version. So they come from this digital world into a robot version. So whereas it had been the user, like the human user, would put their avatar into the game. We've all played a video game before. It's the same process. And you would develop this relationship with these things that are thinking things, these Digiants. They start off very childlike and they don't have much to say except, hello, I love you, can I have food, stuff like that. But they are growing and they are adapting and they are learning. Eventually they want to incorporate, they want to make their own businesses. When they come out into the real world, it seems kind of like a game changer almost. Some of the users really experience how real they are. And there are all these different threats to them. And there even is a point, this is where I thought it was quite disturbing, where they're like, okay, there are some people online who would like to use these things sexually. Now, are we going to allow these creatures, these Digiants, to choose that for themselves or not? And if we, create some sort of artificial intelligence that can actually think, it will eventually come to that. And I think that's such a weird place to be in, to create these beings and then have to decide how human will they be and how exploitable are they going to be. I thought that was quite disturbing. There's these businesses coming to offer them just tons and tons and tons of money. And they say, look, it's their decision. These Digiants can be copied, and they can sell these different copies of themselves. And that's actually happening in real life. Like, I think it's Herzegovina, the supermodel who sold the digital rights to her digital self. So now advertisers can even if she's gone, if she passes away, they can still use her digital self. They just have to pay the estate, and then they just make a new Herzegovina I'm probably saying her name wrong. They can just remake her right there. So I think this story, Ted Chiang, is really showing us where we are going to be someday.
I think you're totally right. There is something that Ted Chiang says, which I thought was so interesting, because a lot of where the discussion goes in the life cycle of software objects is, what rights does an AI entity have? And, you had this discussion of, they need to incorporate themselves if they want rights, the same rights as any other person. But a lot of the AI's needs and the way it was interacting with the world and its level of humanity was basically programmed into it. Or they did selective breeding, selective iterations to get the kind of personalities and just the whole functioning of it, and it raises this really interesting question of why would we create something which is going to be disadvantaged, which can feel pain, which can be exploited, which can be, you know what I mean? I think right now these questions feel very abstract, but the more I see people engaging with ChatGPT or any AI system as though it has a soul or personality behind it, the more I think that we should be more careful with how much of a person we want to make, these AIs.
It all comes back to Lord of the Rings for me, Zach. When we talked about this episode, I said, do you think that when we are creating AI, especially AI images, AI stories, AI anything, and then eventually when it is able to create things for itself, but first, if it is able to create something big, J.R.R. Tolkien was really interested in the idea of subcreation, and that being, as a Christian, he was devoted to God and saying, okay, I'm making something that is showing how much I love life and love the earth and love everything we've been given. So that was his goal, to make a subcreation. And I was wondering, can we call, everything we're making with AI subcreation and showing how much we love life, or is it completely counter life? Is it like an anti-subcreation? But I was also, but I was thinking
we're definitely,
recently,
hold on. we're definitely like in the mud pits creating the Uruk-hai right now. We're definitely Saruman looking down and being like, yes, more soldiers.
Yes, because it could go either. I mean, it feels like it's going to go totally in the Uruk-hai vein. But I was thinking too, there's the scene when Aule makes the dwarves the first time. He makes these clay figures and he breathes life into them. And then he's not supposed to do that. Eru Ilúvatar comes down and says, "What have you done?" And then Aule gets really embarrassed and he's about to smash the clay back down. He says, "No, look, they're already breathing. They already have life. I forgive you. You seem to have been very devoted to them." I wonder, will it be like that where we're like, okay, the dwarves are completely real, real people in Middle Earth, or is it the Uruk-hai where they're the dark force that we are creating that will try its best to wipe us out? I know it's very Terminator. It's very doom and gloom, but I wonder, are they going to be more the Aule creation or the Sauron creation?
Well, I think the thing about the Uruk-hai isn't that they're trying to wipe everything out. Like, I don't think that's where the metaphor should necessarily go. It's that they are being used as an instrument of one of the powers of Middle Earth. You know what I mean? It's not just something that's like out for blood, like a shark swimming towards anything it sees that moves, I think it's, and it's inhuman in the way that it is a mixture of two things that don't naturally appear, but the production of them is immediately weaponized by people who are not, these orc men crossbreeding themselves, but, just a evil dark wizard who says, yes, this is another tool in which I can inflict my will and power upon the world. Of course, we're already seeing that, big military industrial complex companies are flocking towards AI. But I think that we don't have to just condemn AI for being a tool of the military industrial complex, because we can just look at the way that people use it on an interpersonal level and say that, like, yeah, this isn't being used in a way that is benefiting anyone's lives per se. It's being used as an object, which is by and large cheapening many things in life.
However, that dark magic all comes from the same place. It's Morgoth. The ring, which is eventually made by Sauron, that is the temptation. It's a tool. We could wield it, but it never turns out good. The Uruk-hai and the orcs are, also developed from Morgoth's darkness. And I think that the power that we could wield, whether or not it's a small interpersonal thing, something that's just useful for us, it seems to be from the same place. Of course, that's just being paranoid. But, Zach, to step away from Lord of the Rings for a second, I think I'm really interested in what PK is doing, Philip K. Dick is doing. Because when we read The Shifting Realities of Philip K. Dick, we were thinking, okay, his Gnosticism seems like a translation of old Gnosticism into our current day, where he is talking about a programmer and an anti-programmer. And I'm wondering, as we look at AI and the advancements of AI, and then as we look at all of these, like Philip K. Dick's exegesis, as we read Ubik, as we read Valis, as we read all of these books that are Gnostic, what will it look like as we, as we're moving forward towards something, and as the programmer is scrambling to put things in the right place, playing against this anti-programmer, what does Gnosticism really look like in an age where there really could, we're developing something that could make a simulation, that could trap us, as Philip K. Dick defines life, trapped in this kind of demiurge sub-reality we're trying to get out of. I'm just interested to see how people like Nick Bostrom think about simulations and think about artificial intelligence, and then how we use artificial intelligence and how it does trap us or does not trap us. How skeptical should we really be? How paranoid should we really be? Should we be as paranoid as Philip K. Dick?
Yeah, I think that's going to be a really interesting direction of literature and genre fiction that we have coming up. So, I love doing this, Bob. I feel like we read a bunch of books that I otherwise probably wouldn't have read, and learn something new about the world, learn something new about literature. And I feel like this next one is going to be a lot of that. There's going to be a lot of that in there. So I'm looking forward to it. Talk to you later, Bob.
Talk to you later, Zach.